Hello there everyone, and welcome back to Void Dwarf Studios, where today we go back into looking at some super heavy tanks from the Imperial Guard. Previously we talked about the Baneblade, the humble, generic, if there is such a word, super heavy tank. But this is just one variation on a number of designs specifically around this chassis. Much like the good old Chimera, this particular super heavy tank has a number of brothers and sisters, each of them designed for a very specific purpose. And we're going to look at a couple of these in this video. Now if you want to know the general specifics of Baneblades, then check out the previous super heavy tank video that I made, which will go a bit more into their specifics. But today, we are going to start off with a question. You're faced with a Chaos Titan, possibly one of the worst scenarios any Imperial commander has to face. What do you send against it? And this is assuming, of course, that there are no Titan legions you can call upon or Astartes. They are busy elsewhere doing things that are possibly more important that perhaps don't feel as important when you're staring at a Chaos Titan. What does the budding Imperial commander do in such circumstances? Well, he can call upon the services of the tank regiments, of course. I mean, it would be a bit like sending chickens to harass a T-Rex. But with enough tanks you could eventually take out a warhound. But what if there is multiple Titans? Oh boy, that's going to get really costly really quickly and possibly cripple your entire campaign. What is suited and is often known as the Titan Killer? Meet the Shadowsword, the answer for any Imperial Guard tank commander for a Titan, be it Chaos, Xenos, or any other obstacle that is lumbering and difficult to remove. Often considered the sister of the Baneblade, weighs in at the same tonnage, but has one very notable difference. Instead of the Demolisher Cannon and the standard armament for Baneblades, the lovingly known Baneblade Cannon is replaced with something far more grandiose, something that is far more capable of dealing serious damage to even a Titan. The Volcano Cannon. This absolutely monster of a laser cannon is one of the most advanced the Imperium own. The power needed to produce this thing is so much that in order to fire this thing, it takes all of the power that is in the Shadowswords V18 multi-fuel power plant in one shot, and takes up to 2 minutes for this massive monster of a gun to recharge and fire again. Now, obviously, one might first assume the recharge time of 2 minutes is quite a long time when you're in the middle of a battle. And well, here's the thing. Titans tend to have void shields. And you might be wondering, well, one Shadow Sword, however powerful the Volcano Cannon might be, it's going to knock out a void shield for sure, but it's not likely to kill a Titan, is it now? No, it is not, my friend, and that is why the Imperial Guard deploy these things, typically at least, in groups of 3. Because the Volcano Cannon, which is typically seen on Titans as one of its long-range weapons, has the drawback of the 2-minute charging time. Now when you're a Titan you have the luxury of void shield generators, so whilst you're recharging the weapon you can be relatively comfortable in the knowledge that the God Emperor's machines, void shields and armour plating will keep you relatively safe from the worst of the gunfire that will be coming your way. But if you're dealing with a traitor Titan and you absolutely have to kill it in the most effective way without the aid of a Titan Legion of your own, then you take the Phaeton pattern volcano cannon that these shadow swords are armed with, and take them in groups of 3. These shadow swords will then lie in wait. Typically they will be covered in camo netting, and their power supply will be kept as low as possible so that the enemy Titan cannot spot them. And once within range of all 3 tanks, one of the tanks will fire the first shot, crippling the void shield, and being the unfortunate attention of the return fire from the Titan, and the other 2 will fire through the void shield and cause devastating damage to a Titan. I'm not kidding here when I say these Titan class weapons are more than enough to completely decimate Titans, particularly with a direct hit. Now, before engaging in a Titan battle with tanks, you're going to have to remember a couple things. First of all, you don't have a void shield generator, which means that if you take the equivalent fire back that the Shadow Sword's volcano cannon can dish out, there is a very high possibility that your tank columns are going to be molten slag, shall we say. This is why Shadow Swords are deployed in groups of 3, because the first one, as previously mentioned, gets the Titan's attention. You may have smaller tanks and other vehicles keeping the Titan amused whilst it shoots them and basically treats them like little Tonka toys, whilst the Shadow Swords calmly remain in position to line up for the perfect shot. And once the Titan is in the position where the tank commanders feel they have the best possible shot, all 3 Shadow Swords will either fire simultaneously or fire one at a time to destroy the Titan. Now, it is possible for a squad of Shadow Swords to kill a Titan in a single volley, or at the very least heavily cripple the thing. But you better make absolutely sure that if you fire, you hit that Titan, because there is a very high probability that one of your 3 Shadow Swords may not make it back to the mechanic for repairs if you are too hasty with your trigger finger. Shadow Swords are produced on multiple Forge Worlds, and because of the demand, there are a number of variations on the Shadow Sword, simply due to the fact that, as a Titan-killing tank, it's sorely needed, particularly when you're dealing with fortifications, large enemy vehicles, or, well, like Titans, as I've just said. But there are many Forge Worlds that produced so-called counterfeit Shadow Swords, ones that do not follow the STC, and subsequently are not as advanced or properly consecrated in their construction, more primitive and less efficient, and typically not sporting the volcano cannon. But if you want the genuine article, then there are truly only 4 places to get it from in the Imperium. The Forge Worlds of Mars, Lucius, Esteban 7, and Triplax Fal, as these are the Forge Worlds that produce the specific STC with all of the logic engines and special targeting arrays that make this thing such an effective anti-tank and anti-Titan sniping tank. Yes, it's not that far to say that this is a tank designed for sniping. As large and lumbering as it is, rolling along the road at a comfortable 18 kilometers an hour, this thing is more than capable of being hidden in the correct circumstances. And really, if you're using this against anything less than an Imperial Knight or a Chaos Titan, then, frankly, that's just filthy overkill, my friend, and I think you need to pick on someone your own size. But hey-ho, nothing is quite like overkill. There are 2 other variations based upon the Shadow Sword. The first one being the aptly named Banesword, a modification of a Quake Cannon, a gun designed for penetrating armour, as well as being an established siegecraft tank. The Banesword, instead of carrying the Volcano Cannon, carries a Quake Cannon. This gigantic artillery piece fires shells that can hit targets up to 24 kilometers away with, for the Imperial Guard, acceptable accuracy. The Quaker Cannon has an interesting form of ammunition. It is essentially a massive artillery shell, but with a twist. every Quake Cannon shell contains the fragment of a planet, supposedly, that has been subjected to exterminatus. This really kind of brings home that this is a gun that you employ upon enemy titans and fortifications that you really want to bring the point across are not going to live through this battle. Quake cannons are often attached to titans, so make no mistake, this is a titan level weapon as much as the volcano cannon is. It's just a blunt instrument as opposed to the perhaps more refined volcano cannon. The only real difference being that whilst the volcano cannon will hit a void shield and dissipate the void shield in one massive energy output, the physical mass of the Quaker Cannon's shell will just smash straight through it. And as it doesn't take quite as long to recharge, I should say reload the gun, you actually might have the chance to get off a second shot before the Titan can get a bead on you. It is a blunt object for an Imperial Guard army that do have a fondness for blunt objects. Although, typically speaking, this is a tank that is more loved when it comes to siege warfare, as the Quake Cannon makes a mockery out of any kind of fortification, and as I previously have mentioned, it is a far simpler tank to reload and continue to fire, which means that the maintenance bill is also much more straightforward, and there is something very satisfying about watching a very heavy, very large shell impact with explosive force. And finally, we have the Stormsword. With a much smaller gun, do not underestimate this tank. Originally designed from a salvaged Shadowsword during a particularly nasty siege on the hive world of Kuldak. It was a jury-rigged, what is now known as a storm siege cannon, firing rocket-propelled siege shells, try and say that 5 times fast, while with more than enough power to completely level a building or a city block. This incredible killing power is fantastic, but it does suffer from a number of drawbacks. Being a jury-rigged tank means that it's not really that highly produced, mostly because the Mechanicum really frown on anyone trying to tinker with their technological toys, and they're not particularly keen on creating it. In fact, there are no known Forge Worlds that actively make this variant of tank. However, Imperial commanders will find ways to get this variant into their arsenal because the Storm Siege Cannon is just such a wonderful fortification breaker. Whilst it would do horrendous damage to a Titan if it could get close enough, it's probably going to be spotted long before this happens, as typically speaking at least, the range of the Storm Siege Cannon is limited, and this means that you really have to get close. And unfortunately, Titans often have very, very, very advanced sensors, and little scout Titans nearby who will spot anything trying to sneak up on you. So this thing is best employed for destroying buildings, absolutely demolishing tanks, and really just rumbling over anything dumb enough to try and get in its way. Melter charges aren't going to stop this very easily. You're going to need something with equal tonnage to shift this thing. And this is my first video on the Baneblade variants. We will cover more tanks in the next episode. Thank you all very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed. Thank you so much to all my new and old subscribers for listening to this Void Dwarf, and I look forward to hearing from you all soon. Until then, take care everyone.